Betrayal has a way of shattering everything: love, trust, and the promise of forever. This is the heartbreaking story of Emilia, the devoted wife whose world collapsed under the weight of her husband's deception. It's the tale of Daniel, the man she trusted, who let greed and temptation lead him astray, and Bianca, a ruthless mistress who stopped at nothing to take what wasn't hers. Their love story began like a dream. Emilia and Daniel met as college students at Princeton University. She was immersed in literature, while he spent nights buried in business strategies. They first crossed paths in the library, exchanging polite smiles that grew into lingering conversations over coffee. What started as innocent companionship soon turned into something deeper. One evening, Daniel finally gathered the courage to ask her to dinner at a quiet Italian cafe. Between laughter and dreams of the future, Emilia saw in him a man of ambition and charm. Daniel, in turn, was captivated by her warmth and intelligence. Their friends called them the perfect match. Her creativity balanced his relentless drive. After graduation, Daniel secured a position at a rising tech firm in Manhattan, often working long hours to climb the corporate ladder. Emilia, determined to build a career of her own, took a job as a teaching assistant, preparing for a future as a professor. Though their schedules were demanding, they carved out time for each other. Long walks through Central Park, late-night takeout dinners, and whispered dreams of their future. 3 years into their relationship, Daniel proposed in a way Emilia never expected. He was never the overly romantic type, but that night he outdid himself. An intimate candlelit dinner, a soft melody playing in the background, and a heartfelt confession of love. As he slipped the diamond ring onto her finger, Emilia felt certain they were destined for a lifetime of happiness. Marriage came with its challenges, but Emilia believed in their bond. She had no idea that, as she carried his child, Daniel was secretly building a life with another woman. She could have never imagined the heartbreak that awaited her. One fateful evening, while sorting through mail, Emilia came across an invitation. The elegant gold lettering made her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't for a business gala or a networking event. It was a wedding invitation. Her husband's wedding. Daniel was set to marry Bianca in a lavish ceremony, and Emilia, his pregnant wife, was the last to know. Tears of joy streamed down Emilia's face as she whispered, yes. Their wedding was a dream, an intimate ceremony in a charming chapel in Brooklyn, surrounded by close friends and family. It was everything she had ever imagined. Life felt perfect, or so she believed. As Daniel's responsibilities at the tech company grew, so did Emilia's devotion. She supported him wholeheartedly as he climbed the corporate ladder, earning a lucrative position. Business dinners, networking events, and late-night meetings became the norm. At first, she didn't mind. She was proud of him, excited to see him succeed. When he was promoted to regional director, they agreed it was finally time to start a family. Emilia was overjoyed, imagining the nursery, tiny socks, and bedtime lullabies. But in the same boardrooms where Daniel sealed his biggest deals, the seeds of her heartbreak were quietly being planted. Late nights turned into weekend trips. Business trips became unexplained absences. She found odd receipts in his pockets, dinners in expensive restaurants she had never visited, unfamiliar hotel charges. She dismissed them at first, blaming the stress of his demanding career. She reminded herself of their vows, of the ring on her finger that symbolized his promise. But life has a way of unraveling secrets, no matter how deeply they're buried. One winter evening, Emilia attended Daniel's company holiday party. He had spoken about a bright new hire, Bianca, a rising star in the marketing department. He admired her creativity, her bold ideas, her ability to command a room. Nothing in his tone sounded suspicious, and Emilia had no reason to doubt him. Dressed in an elegant navy blue dress, she arrived at the rooftop lounge overlooking the New York skyline. The air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses as Daniel introduced her to board members and executives. Then, finally, to Bianca. She was striking, petite, with sharp features and an effortless confidence. Her smile was warm, yet something in her gaze made Emilia shiver. As they exchanged pleasantries, Emilia noticed the way Bianca's eyes lingered on Daniel, how her laughter was just a little too familiar. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But in that moment, for the first time, Emilia felt it. A whisper of doubt, a shadow of something she couldn't quite name. She shook off the uneasy feeling. This was Daniel, her husband, the man who had promised her forever. She had no idea that Bianca was already planning a wedding of her own, a wedding where Daniel was the groom. It could have been simple admiration, just a young employee impressed by her boss's success. But something about Bianca's gaze felt too intense, too deliberate. Emilia brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. After all, Daniel and Bianca had a professional relationship, nothing more. Yet, as the night unfolded, she noticed it again. Bianca finding small reasons to be near him, her fingers grazing his sleeve, her voice dropping when she spoke to him. Daniel didn't seem to notice, or maybe Emilia feared he chose not to. In the months that followed, Daniel became increasingly absorbed in work. His meetings stretched longer, deadlines piled up, and exhaustion clung to him like a shadow. Emilia tried to be patient. She welcomed him home with warm dinners, listened attentively when he vented about company politics, and never complained when their conversations became brief and distracted. But one thing gnawed at her. Bianca's name surfaced too often in Daniel's stories. Late nights at the office, urgent weekend projects, last-minute investor meetings. Then, one afternoon, while tidying up their apartment, Emilia found receipts tucked inside Daniel's suit pocket. Dinners at expensive restaurants she had never been to. A boutique gift bag, empty except for crumpled tissue paper. The purchase date aligned perfectly with the night he had told her he was stuck at work. Her heart pounded as she confronted him gently that evening. Daniel met her gaze with practiced calm. He explained the dinners were purely business, essential for securing investments. The gift, he insisted, had been for a long-time client, a token of appreciation. "You're carrying our child," he murmured, placing his hand over her growing belly. "I would never do anything to jeopardize our family's happiness." His voice was steady, but something felt off. Like a picture frame slightly askew, her once secure world tilted. If Bianca was just a colleague, why did Emilia feel a quiet pang of jealousy each time her name flashed on Daniel's phone? Why did his explanations never quite align, like puzzle pieces forced into the wrong places? Rather than press further, Emilia buried herself in preparing for the baby. She wanted to believe that once their child arrived, Daniel would find renewed devotion in their family. She poured her energy into creating the perfect nursery, choosing soft pastels and plush toys as if she could paint over her anxieties with motherhood. She had dreamed of bedtime stories, laughter echoing through their home, quiet weekend strolls in the park. Unbeknownst to her, the cracks were only deepening. Bianca was no ordinary colleague. She had already set her sights on becoming Daniel's wife. Bianca wanted more than a promotion. She wanted Daniel. Her flirtations had been calculated from the start, aligning her ambitions with his dreams. Emilia had no idea that Bianca was willing to destroy anyone standing in her way, especially a devoted wife who believed in love and loyalty. For now, Emilia remained blind to the betrayal creeping into her marriage, holding on to fragile hope. What she couldn't see was that the foundation beneath her was already crumbling. By her second trimester, Emilia's morning sickness became unbearable. The nausea left her drained, forcing her to take leave from her teaching job. She spent more time alone in the apartment, a quiet unease settling over her. She had always believed in open communication, yet Daniel had become a stranger in his own home. He left before sunrise and returned well past midnight. Every attempt to reconnect was met with vague reassurances. Just a busy quarter. Or the investors need me. One Sunday afternoon, a sharp pain shot through Emilia's abdomen. Fear gripped her as she reached for her phone. Daniel was at a business conference. At least, that's what he had told her. With no one else to call, she reached out to her college friend, Marianne, who rushed over and took her to the hospital. Thankfully, the doctor assured her everything was fine. The stress and exhaustion were taking a toll, but the baby was strong. As they drove home, Marianne gave Emilia a concerned glance. "Are you sure it's just stress?" she asked carefully. Emilia hesitated. She hadn't spoken about the growing distance in her marriage, but under Marianne's gentle encouragement, the words spilled out. How Daniel was never home, how Bianca's name kept surfacing, how something felt off. Marianne sighed. "I don't want to put doubts in your head, but maybe you should check his phone records or messages." not because you don't trust him, but because you deserve the truth. Amelia nodded, torn between loyalty and fear, but her own doubts had already taken root. The next morning, as Daniel slept off another late night, Amelia reached for his phone with trembling hands. She hesitated, battling the guilt twisting in her stomach, but then she unlocked it. At first, she found nothing, just the usual work emails and messages. But then, she saw Bianca's name. Her breath caught as she scrolled through their conversation. The messages were brief but intimate, inside jokes, flirtatious teasing, mentions of private dinners. Then the final blow. A text from Bianca, sent just 2 nights ago. "I miss you. Counting down the days until we don't have to hide anymore. I can't wait until we can finally share our relationship with the world. I'm tired of hiding." The words glowed on the screen, slicing through Amelia like a blade. Her breath caught, her hands trembled, and for a moment, the world around her blurred. Daniel lay asleep beside her, completely unaware that his carefully guarded secret had just shattered the illusion of their marriage. She placed the phone back with quiet precision and rushed to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched her stomach. How could this be happening? She was carrying his child, yet another woman was the one he wanted to flaunt to the world. In the days that followed, Amelia found herself trapped in a silent storm of heartbreak and suspicion. Once the veil of denial had lifted, she began noticing everything. The way Daniel never let his phone out of sight, how he became defensive when she questioned his late nights, and the faint, unfamiliar perfume that clung to his shirts. But the worst part? The way his eyes lit up whenever he spoke Bianca's name. It was fleeting, but unmistakable, like the memory of something forbidden and exhilarating. Still, Amelia wasn't the type to act without proof. Determined, she started collecting the evidence she needed. She combed through credit card statements, finding unexplained charges from expensive restaurants and boutique hotels. Late at night, she scrolled through Bianca's social media, scrutinizing every detail. A picture at an upscale bar, Daniel's favorite. A museum Amelia had always wanted to visit, yet he had claimed he had no interest. In some photos, a man's sleeve, a reflection in a mirror. Daniel's suit. Each discovery chipped away at the foundation of their marriage, leaving only a hollow, painful truth. One evening, after yet another tense exchange, Amelia finally found the courage to confront him. "Tell me the truth about Bianca," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. Daniel scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "Are we really doing this? You're being paranoid, Amelia. Hormonal." She flinched. He wasn't just denying it, he was making her doubt herself. "You don't love me anymore, do you?" Her voice cracked. Something in his face flickered, guilt, hesitation, but it disappeared just as quickly. With an irritated sigh, he grabbed his coat. "I don't have time for this." And then he walked out. The door slammed shut, leaving Amelia standing alone, her pregnant belly a silent testament to the life he was supposed to cherish. She collapsed to the floor, sobs shaking her body. But as the tears blurred her vision, she placed a protective hand over her stomach. She had just uncovered the unthinkable. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was building a life with Bianca. And for the first time, her heartbreak hardened into something else. Determination. She would not let them destroy her. Daniel's response was always the same, a wall of denial. Some days he was affectionate, pressing kisses to Amelia's forehead, whispering apologies as if trying to erase her suspicions. But then he would disappear for hours without explanation. Other times, he was cold and detached, muttering vague excuses about pressing business matters. Amelia oscillated between anger and longing, torn between the man she had fallen in love with and the stranger who now shared her bed. Determined not to be a passive victim, she confided in Marianne once more. Over steaming mugs of coffee in her living room, Marianne leaned in, concern etched on her face. "You need to prepare yourself," she said gently. "Get your financial affairs in order. Open a separate bank account. Document everything. If this leads to a separation or divorce, you need to protect yourself and your baby." Amelia nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking deeper into her bones. The next morning, she walked into the bank and opened a private savings account. Every small deposit felt like a lifeline, a quiet act of reclaiming control. She began making copies of tax returns, property deeds, and bank statements. each piece of paper a shield against the betrayal closing in around her. Meanwhile, at Daniel's company, whispers had begun to circulate. A few colleagues, aware of his late-night outings with Bianca, grew uneasy. While many admired his business acumen, they disapproved of his personal choices, especially after learning that his wife was expecting. But Bianca was shrewd. She maintained an impeccable professional image, earning praise for her marketing expertise. In hushed office conversations, she painted Amelia as an overly jealous wife, someone who refused to accept that her marriage was already unraveling. Amelia learned of this through an anonymous email from a sympathetic employee. "Be careful. Bianca is telling people you're unstable. She's making Daniel look like a victim. She's pushing for a public relationship soon." Amelia's blood ran cold. Bianca wasn't just an affair. She was orchestrating a takeover of Amelia's life, rewriting the truth to suit her own agenda. That night, Amelia made a decision. She had never imagined herself capable of such a thing, but desperation left her with no choice. When Daniel left the apartment, claiming he had a late meeting with international clients, she didn't stay behind. She followed him. From a safe distance, she watched as he drove downtown, eventually pulling up in front of a quiet, upscale restaurant. Minutes later, Bianca arrived, her red dress clinging to her like a statement of victory. Daniel greeted her with a lingering touch, one that told Amelia everything she needed to know. He wasn't just betraying her in secret. He was preparing to make Bianca his new wife. She slipped into a taxi, her hands gripping the seat as she followed Daniel's car through the city streets. The glowing lights of Manhattan blurred past her window, but her focus never wavered. When his car pulled up to a luxury hotel in Midtown, a sickening sense of confirmation settled in her chest. From the corner of the lobby, she watched as Daniel approached the reception desk, hand in hand with Bianca. Amelia's breath caught in her throat, burning with the sting of betrayal. Bianca leaned into him, laughing, her head resting against his shoulder as if she belonged there. Amelia couldn't bear another second. She turned and stumbled out onto the street, the roar of New York's traffic drowning out the sound of her silent, shattering sobs. Any lingering hope of saving her marriage was gone. They weren't hiding. They were flaunting their affair as if they were already husband and wife. Fury and heartbreak warred inside her. She wanted to storm into that lobby, demand answers, scream until Daniel had no choice but to face what he had done. But she couldn't risk it, not when she was carrying his child. Instead, she steeled herself. If Daniel was willing to throw away their marriage so easily, she would not go down without protecting herself. She would gather enough proof of his affair to ensure she and her baby wouldn't be left with nothing. The tension in their home became unbearable. Daniel pretended everything was normal, coming and going as if he wasn't living a double life. Meanwhile, Amelia quietly built her case. She collected financial records, documented his absences, and secured evidence that would strip away any facade he tried to maintain. A confrontation was inevitable. The morning after her discovery at the hotel, Amelia woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. The sadness had hardened into something sharper, resolve. When Daniel emerged from the shower, she was waiting for him. Standing tall, visibly pregnant, she met his gaze without hesitation. "Why were you at the Langford with Bianca?" Her voice was steady, but inside she was trembling. Daniel's face paled before twisting into forced calm. "I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong." Amelia didn't flinch. "I saw everything. You checked in together, holding hands. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." Caught off guard, he tried to spin a lie. Something about a business deal, an investor who preferred private meetings, Bianca being there only for a marketing pitch. His words were hollow. So she pulled out her phone and showed him the photos she had taken, his hand on Bianca's waist, her fingers playing with his tie. The argument exploded. Amelia accused him of betraying their marriage, of abandoning her when she needed him most. Daniel lashed out, calling her paranoid, accusing her of trying to ruin his career. Then, in one final act of cruelty, he told her she was the reason their marriage had fallen apart. Daniel's eyes burned with anger as he sneered, "You've never supported me the way Bianca does." The words sliced through Amelia like a blade. Every sacrifice she had made, late nights waiting for him, putting her own career on hold, standing by his side, meant nothing compared to the empty flattery of his mistress. Before she could stop herself, she grabbed the nearest vase from the nightstand and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, shards flying in every direction. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, tears spilling down her cheeks. For a brief second, Daniel looked stunned, as if finally realizing just how far he had pushed her. But the shock faded, replaced by cold, simmering anger. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the bedroom, retreating to the living room. Amelia collapsed onto the couch, clutching her stomach, as guilt, fury, and heartbreak tore at her insides. She knew stress wasn't good for the baby, but how could she stay calm when the world she had built was crumbling before her eyes? Moments later, Daniel reappeared, dressed and ready to leave. "I can't stay here," he said, his tone emotionless. "You're hysterical. I'll come back when you've calmed down." Amelia wanted to scream, to block the door, to force him to face what he had done. But she didn't. She just stood there, silent, tears rolling down her face as he walked out, shutting the door behind him. The air in the apartment felt suffocating, thick with tension, grief, and the ghost of the love they once shared. In the following days, Daniel barely came home. His text messages were brief. "I need space. This is too much stress. We'll talk later." She knew exactly who was fueling his distance. The phone calls started next, unknown numbers that hung up as soon as she answered. And then one night, a voice finally spoke. Low, taunting, filled with venom. "He's mine now. Stop clinging to something that's already gone." The line went dead. Amelia's hands trembled as she lowered the phone. Bianca. She had never heard her speak so openly before, so brazenly claiming what didn't belong to her. Time stretched on, and Amelia continued attending her prenatal checkups alone, feeling a fresh sting every time the doctor asked if the baby's father would be joining her. She forced hollow smiles when acquaintances asked about Daniel, brushing off their concerns with vague excuses. Inside, she was raging. She had glimpsed a side of Daniel she never wanted to believe existed. Cruel, selfish, and willing to lie to her face without hesitation. And she knew this was only the beginning. Worse betrayals lay ahead, ones that would push Amelia to the brink and force her to fight harder than she ever had before. Late one night, desperate for a distraction, she scrolled mindlessly through the internet, hoping to escape her thoughts. Then, an email arrived from an anonymous sender. "Open this if you want the truth." Her heart pounded as she hesitated, fingers trembling over the mouse. Against her better judgment, she clicked the link. A wedding registry appeared on her screen. She skimmed the page, confusion morphing into horror. Daniel Carter and Bianca Reynolds. The wedding was set for 3 weeks away. At the Ritz-Carlton, New York Central Park. Amelia's stomach lurched. This had to be a mistake. How could Daniel possibly be planning a wedding when he was already married to her? But as she scrolled through the registry, her worst fears solidified. The details were too personal, too precise to be a cruel joke. A honeymoon fun for the Maldives, Daniel's dream destination. Bianca's love for French pastries mentioned under catering requests. A wine selection featuring the exact brand Daniel always kept in their home. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. For hours, she sat frozen, staring at the screen, disbelief and rage clashing in her chest. Someone had sent her this on purpose, someone who knew the truth. Had it come from one of Daniel's colleagues? A friend who couldn't stomach the deception any longer? Whoever it was, their message was clear. Daniel and Bianca were planning to make their relationship official, and they assumed Amelia wouldn't find out until it was too late. The next morning, her hands shook as she dialed the Ritz-Carlton, posing as an excited guest who had misplaced her invitation. The receptionist confirmed the reservation for a private wedding ceremony. Amelia barely managed to thank them before ending the call. She slumped to the floor, sobs racking her body. This wasn't just infidelity. This was an attempt to erase her entirely. Her mind raced, picturing her child growing up without a father, while Daniel built a new life under the same vows he had once exchanged with her. But how was this even possible? He was still legally married to her. Was he secretly filing for divorce behind her back? Or, worse, was he forging some scheme to invalidate their marriage? The thought sent a chill down her spine. Summoning every ounce of strength left in her, she made an appointment with a lawyer. The moment she laid out her evidence, he frowned deeply. "If this is real," he said gravely, "Daniel isn't just cheating, he's committing bigamy, and that's a crime." Amelia swallowed hard. She had gone looking for the truth, and now she had it. The lawyer stared at the wedding registry, shaking his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Daniel isn't just being reckless, he's committing fraud. You need to gather as much documentation as possible. This will be a legal battle." Amelia nodded, though inside she was barely holding it together. A storm of emotions raged within her. Betrayal, heartbreak, fury. She forced herself to focus, to stay composed for the sake of her unborn child. She threw herself into preparation. She made copies of their marriage certificate, collected bank statements, and forwarded every incriminating email to a private folder. She recorded voicemails, took screenshots of text messages, anything that would expose the deception. But in the quiet moments, her mind wandered back to the man she once loved. The one who had kissed her forehead the morning of their wedding. The one who had held her hand and promised forever. How could that man and the one standing at the altar for another woman be the same person? As the wedding day approached, Amelia's sorrow hardened into something unbreakable. She didn't yet know how she would use this information, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't hide in the shadows. Daniel and Bianca's wedding wouldn't happen without consequences. The day arrived like an approaching storm. Standing before the mirror, Amelia took in her reflection. Her once delicate features had sharpened with resolve. The curve of her stomach, unmistakable now, was a reminder of what she was fighting for. She chose a simple black maternity dress, not to blend in, but to make a statement. With every step toward the Ritz-Carlton, her heart pounded, her pulse roaring in her ears. She had imagined this moment countless times. Sometimes she pictured Daniel falling to his knees, begging for forgiveness. Other times she foresaw a chaotic scene, ending with security dragging her away. She was prepared for anything. The hotel lobby bustled with wedding guests, elegantly dressed and chatting in hushed tones. With discreet inquiries, Amelia learned that the ceremony was set on the rooftop terrace, an extravagant space adorned with white roses, gilded chairs, and a breathtaking view of Central Park. She took the elevator up, her stomach twisting. As the doors opened, she stepped into the grand setting just as Bianca, radiant in her designer gown, floated down the aisle. At the altar, Daniel stood stiff, his eyes darting anxiously around the room. Maybe he feared a last-minute interruption. Or maybe, deep down, he knew his sins were about to catch up with him. A ripple of whispers spread through the wedding guests, some recognizing Amelia from corporate events. Eyes widened in shock. Others exchanged hurried murmurs, trying to piece together the scandal unraveling before them. Summoning every ounce of courage, Amelia stepped forward. The click of her heels against the polished marble floor rang out like gunfire in the hushed atmosphere. Bianca's eyes locked onto her, widening in alarm. The officiant hesitated, glancing nervously between the bride and the approaching woman. But the moment Amelia's voice cut through the silence, the entire ceremony came to a halt. "Are you seriously attempting to marry this woman when you already have a wife and a child on the way?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Bianca's face twisted from shock to fury. Daniel, his face drained of all color, stumbled forward. "This isn't what you think," he stammered. But Amelia wasn't finished. She turned to Bianca, eyes burning with betrayal. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You've been sleeping with a married man, and now you're trying to replace me?" The poised, elegant mask Bianca always wore cracked. Then, with a sharp sneer, she hissed, "Daniel was never happy with you. You forced him into a life he didn't want." The words hit like a slap. So Amelia gave her a real one. The sharp crack echoed across the terrace as Bianca staggered, clutching her cheek in shock. Chaos erupted. Some guests rushed to Bianca's side, while others gasped in disbelief. A few turned to Daniel, demanding an explanation. Security took a cautious step forward, unsure whether to intervene. Amelia's fury boiled over as she turned to her husband, her voice shaking with rage. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our child. How could you do this?" Before Daniel could respond, she shoved him with all the strength she had left. He stumbled backward, nearly toppling over the steps leading up to the altar. The security team hesitated, but some guests raised their hands, signaling them to stand down. Many seemed horrified that they had unwittingly attended a sham wedding. The cameras were already flashing. Photographers captured every moment: Emilia's fury, Bianca's humiliation, Daniel's guilt-stricken face. Still desperate to salvage the moment, Daniel's voice wavered as he tried to protest. "This is a misunderstanding." But it was too late. Emilia's presence, her undeniable pregnancy, and the fire in her eyes had shattered every illusion of legitimacy this wedding ever had. Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she placed a protective hand over her belly. "I gave you everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And this is how you repay me?" Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away. A stunned silence followed. Then, hushed murmurs filled the space as guests processed the scene they had just witnessed. But Emilia didn't stop. She had said what she came to say, and she would never look back. The wedding lay in ruins. Guests scattered in all directions, whispers and hurried conversations filling the once elegant rooftop. The officiant conferred urgently with the hotel staff. Bianca stood frozen, seething, her eyes locked on Emilia's retreating figure. At the altar, Daniel looked like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse in a single moment. Emilia had exposed the truth, shattering every illusion of legitimacy surrounding his sham wedding. The storm had arrived in full force, and it had left nothing but destruction in its wake. News of the fiasco spread like wildfire through Daniel's professional circle. Photos taken by wedding guests surfaced online, flooding social media and painting a damning picture of betrayal and scandal. The board of directors at his company found themselves bombarded with uncomfortable questions from investors. How could their top executive be at the center of such a public disgrace? Bianca, once the darling of the marketing department, faced her own reckoning. Colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with her downfall. The whispers in office hallways turned into open condemnation. Daniel scrambled to do damage control, but the scandal was too massive to contain. He had not only committed blatant infidelity, he had attempted to marry another woman while still legally wed. The company released an official statement condemning unethical behavior among executives. Under immense pressure, Daniel was forced to resign, citing personal reasons. Back at the apartment, Emilia wrestled with a storm of emotions. A part of her felt grim satisfaction at the destruction of the wedding, yet grief and disbelief weighed heavily on her. She had loved the man she married, but that man no longer existed. Days blurred into nights as she battled anxiety, wondering what the future held for her and her child. Her close friend Marianne became her anchor, visiting often, helping her with daily tasks, offering quiet support when Emilia felt like she might break. One evening, Marianne arrived with a tabloid magazine, hesitating before handing it over. High-powered executive's illicit wedding exposed by pregnant wife. The article detailed every scandalous moment. Some of the quotes were exaggerated, but the truth remained. "I'm so sorry you have to go through this," Marianne whispered, wrapping Emilia in a comforting hug. Meanwhile, Bianca scrambled to salvage what was left of her reputation. In a public statement, she played the victim, insisting that Daniel had deceived her. "I had no idea he was still with Emilia," she claimed in an interview. But no one believed her. Emilia's visible pregnancy and the undeniable timeline of events made it impossible to rewrite the truth. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, disheveled, exhausted, and desperate. "Please," he murmured, "I need to talk." Heart pounding, Emilia hesitated. Then, against her better judgment, she stepped aside and let him in. Daniel stood in the middle of the living room, looking like an intruder in his own home. His eyes darted around the space they had once shared, now unfamiliar, cold. "I've lost everything," he murmured, his voice thick with regret. "The company forced me to resign. My reputation is destroyed. And Bianca, she won't even return my calls." His shoulders sagged, the weight of his own mistakes pressing down on him. For a moment, Emilia wanted to scream, to unleash all the pain he had caused her. But another part of her, the part that had once loved him, could only feel pity. "What did you expect?" she asked, arms crossing protectively over her swollen belly. "You lied to everyone. You tried to marry another woman while I'm carrying your child. Do you even realize how insane that is?" Daniel lowered his head, tears glistening in his eyes. "I was stupid, reckless. Bianca convinced me you'd be better off without me. She told me she could help my career, that we'd build a future together. But it was all a lie. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. Silence stretched between them. Emilia saw the remorse in his expression, but she also remembered the gaslighting, the deception, the humiliation. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, she whispered, tears sliding down her own cheeks. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed our child. Daniel nodded, looking like a man stranded in a storm without direction. Can I do anything to help you? With the pregnancy, the baby, anything? Emilia hesitated. Part of her wanted him out of her life forever. But another part, the part thinking of her unborn child, knew that, despite everything, their baby deserved the chance to know its father. Finally, she exhaled. I'll talk to my lawyer. We'll figure out the next steps. Daniel swallowed hard, then turned and walked out the door. The moment it clicked shut, Emilia collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion washing over her. The battle was far from over. There would be legal fights, custody discussions, the emotional toll of raising a child alone. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. She had exposed the truth. She had reclaimed her power. She had taken the first step toward a new life. And karma, it seemed, was delivering its own justice. Days later, Daniel discovered that Bianca had drained a significant sum from their joint honeymoon fund, money he had foolishly set aside for their extravagant trip to the Maldives. When he confronted her, she only shrugged. Consider it compensation, she said smugly, for the humiliation I endured. That was when Daniel realized the truth. Bianca had never cared for him. She had only wanted his money, status, and the thrill of stealing him away. And now that his career was ruined, she had no reason to stay. Bianca vanished from Daniel's life as quickly as she had entered it. She changed her number, moved out of the apartment they had secretly shared, and was soon spotted at high-end lounges, charming her next prospect. Rumors swirled around the office. She had already set her sights on another executive, a married man whose wife owned a successful skincare empire. Daniel, meanwhile, struggled to rebuild his life, but every door slammed in his face. Companies that once praised him as a rising star refused to even consider his resume, citing reputation concerns. Friends who had once welcomed him into exclusive circles now kept their distance, not wanting to be linked to his scandal. Even his own family barely spoke to him, their disappointment so deep that his mother urged him to seek professional help. Late at night, he would call Emilia, his voice strained, begging for a second chance. Each time, she reminded him, his choices had consequences. For Emilia, the aftermath was like an emotional tsunami, slowly retreating and leaving debris behind. She was relieved that Bianca had been unmasked, but the reality of her new life was daunting. She still had to navigate co-parenting with a man who swung between remorse and desperation. At her lawyer's advice, she proposed a formal agreement. Daniel would provide child support, cover medical expenses, and maintain a respectful distance, unless it involved their baby's well-being. Though life remained complicated, small victories gave Emilia hope. She found part-time work tutoring high school students, using her literature background to guide them through essays and exams. It wasn't much, but it gave her purpose, a sense of control over her life again. Marianne introduced her to a support group for single mothers, where she heard stories of strength, survival, and triumph. She realized she wasn't alone. One crisp afternoon, Emilia treated herself to a quiet moment in Central Park. As she sat on a bench, watching children laugh and couples stroll hand in hand, she felt it, a tiny but unmistakable flutter inside her. Her baby kicked. A new life was forming inside her, untouched by the chaos of betrayal. That moment crystallized her resolve. She would not let this heartbreak define her. She would build a future not out of anger, but out of love. Meanwhile, Daniel's nights grew lonelier. He had traded genuine love for a hollow pursuit of power and excitement, and now he was left with nothing but regret. One evening, he found himself standing inside the old chapel in Brooklyn, the place where he had once vowed forever to Emilia. Tears streamed down his face as he silently begged for forgiveness from a memory. But no prayer could erase what he had done. Bianca, on the other hand, seemed untouched by the scandal. She flaunted her glamorous new life on Instagram, posting photos of luxury dinners and weekend getaways. But even Emilia knew, appearances could be deceiving. Bianca moved on effortlessly, as if none of it had ever touched her. Rumors swirled that she had already set her sights on another high-level executive, one with a beautiful, unsuspecting wife. Perhaps karma would come for her one day. But Emilia had no interest in chasing revenge. Life had a way of setting things right, and she found peace in knowing that true justice often came in unexpected ways. As for Daniel, his punishment had already arrived. His name was ruined, his career in free fall, and the woman he sacrificed everything for had abandoned him. Now, all that remained was the weight of regret. Winter melted into spring, bringing a sense of renewal. Despite the emotional wreckage left behind, Emilia's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Her doctor scheduled a due date in late April. As her belly grew, so did her determination. She channeled all her energy into preparing for her baby, setting up a nursery, folding tiny clothes, and carefully organizing the essentials. Some nights, she would place a gentle hand on her stomach and whisper, "We're going to be okay." She didn't know if the baby could hear her, but it comforted her all the same. Daniel tried to stay involved, though he remained at a cautious distance. He sent occasional texts checking on her health, offering to attend doctor's appointments. After much thought, Emilia agreed to let him come to one final checkup before the birth. When he arrived, he looked different, subdued, hollowed out. The once powerful man who commanded boardrooms now stood before her, humbled. In the examination room, the hum of the ultrasound machine filled the silence. On the screen, their baby's tiny heartbeat flickered. Tears glistened in both their eyes. For a fleeting moment, memories of their happier days resurfaced, reminders of what they once dreamed of together. But some things were beyond repair. When the appointment ended, they exchanged polite words. Daniel promised to cover the hospital expenses. Then he left, carrying the weight of his mistakes with him. Days later, in the quiet hours of morning, Emilia's contractions began. Marianne rushed her to the hospital, where labor stretched for hours. She gripped the bed rails, waves of pain washing over her. For a brief moment, she wished Daniel was there to hold her hand. But then she realized she didn't need him anymore. She was surrounded by love, by friends who had stood by her, by the quiet strength she had built for herself. She was bringing new life into the world on her own terms. At 9:43 p.m., she took one final breath before the room filled with the sound of her baby's first cry. And with that, a new chapter of her life began. Her baby boy entered the world with a single piercing cry. The sound filled the hospital room, and Emilia felt an overwhelming rush of emotions: relief, exhaustion, joy. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she cradled the tiny life in her arms, her heart swelling with unconditional love. Marianne hugged her tightly, beaming with pride. 3 days later, as Emilia prepared to leave the hospital, Daniel arrived. He approached cautiously, as if unsure of his place in this new reality. After an awkward greeting, he hesitated before speaking. "Can I hold him?" Emilia's fingers tightened around the blanket wrapped around her son. Then, after a moment, she exhaled and gently placed the baby in his arms. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. "He's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything I've done." Emilia nodded, crossing her arms protectively. "It's not me you need to apologize to," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the tiny face in Daniel's hands. She knew their future would never look the way she once imagined. She was resolute in her decision. There was no place for Daniel in her heart anymore. But her son deserved the chance to know his father. They discussed a custody arrangement. Daniel agreed to provide financial support and visit regularly. It wasn't the fairy tale family Emilia had once dreamed of, but she had learned a hard truth. Life doesn't follow the script we write in our hearts. All she could do was move forward, ensuring her child grew up free from the shadows of betrayal. When she arrived home, she was met with warmth. Marianne had decorated the apartment with soft balloons and a small sign that read, "Welcome home, baby Carter." The nursery was a sanctuary, painted in calming hues of cream and light blue. As Emilia rocked her son in the cozy space, gratitude filled her chest. Despite the heartbreak, she had found a new purpose: motherhood. The weeks passed, and Emilia adapted to her new life. She learned the rhythm of her baby's cries, the lullabies that soothed him to sleep, the quiet strength it took to navigate single parenthood. She wouldn't say she had forgiven Daniel, not yet. But the raw anger had faded, replaced by something lighter. Maybe one day she would love again. But for now, her world belonged to the baby who had given her life new meaning. Standing by the window one evening, cradling her son, she gazed at the city lights. A peaceful certainty washed over her. The painful chapters of her past were closed. Before her stretched a new beginning, one of resilience, love, and hope. Sometimes, the end of one story is simply the beginning of something far more powerful. If this journey of heartbreak, survival, and strength resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us that even after the darkest storms, the light of a new day always comes.